Ladies and gentlemen, would you please rise for the national anthem and remain standing for the invocation, which will be pronounced by Captain Gary Lyons, who is the Force Chaplain, Submarine Force, U.S. Atlantic Fleet.
I invite you to join me in a brief prayer. General Creighton Abrams said, "We cannot buy pride, we cannot legislate it, we cannot force it, and yet we cannot do without it." Today is one in which all of us are filled with pride as we christen this superb ship, USS Tucson. Our prayer, O God, is that you will guard and guide the crew who take her to sea and all who will cross her decks in decades to come. And while we celebrate the technological achievements of those who have built her, may the greatest achievement of all be the preservation of peace. For as President Teddy Roosevelt stated, the Navy of the United States is the right arm of the United States and is emphatically the peacemaker. Amen.
Good morning. I'm Pat Phillips, and I'm president of Newport News Shipbuilding. And it's a great pleasure to welcome all of you to the christening of the Navy's newest submarine, Tucson. Thank you, Captain Lyons, for leading us in the invocation. And thanks also to Chief Musician Mate Mark Cochran and the U.S. Navy Band from Washington, D.C. It's always great to have you here to help us celebrate such an event. I'd also like to take a moment and introduce our special guest on the platform, starting from your left, Captain Gary Lyons, Force Chaplain, Submarine Force, U.S. Atlantic Fleet. Rear Admiral Thomas Ryan, Director, Submarine Warfare Division. The Honorable Bobby Scott, Representative, 3rd District of Virginia. Admiral Bruce DeMars, Director, Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program. Our sponsor, Ms. Diane Kent. The Honorable Jim Colby, Representative, 5th District, Arizona. and our maid of honor, Ms. Laura Kent. The Honorable George Miller, Mayor of Tucson. Our next guest is a longtime supporter and friend of Newport News Shipbuilding, a mainstay in the House Armed Services Committee. Herb Bateman is one of the most dedicated men I know. Captain, we have Vice Admiral George Emery, who's Commander, Submarine Force, U.S. Atlantic Fleet. Welcome back, Admiral. Captain Roland Knapp, Supervisor of Shipbuilding, Newport News. And a very important individual with us on Tucson, Commander Dwayne Baker, Prospective Commanding Officer, USS TUCSON. In addition to our special guests on the platform, I'd like to recognize several people in the audience. Mrs. Hyman Rickover is with us today. As you know, Mrs. Rickover's late husband, Admiral Rickover, was a father of the nuclear navy. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Rickover. Also with us is former Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition, Mr. Gerald Cann, who also happens to be married to our ship sponsor. Welcome, Gerald. Standing in ranks to my left is a crew of the Tucson. Today we christen their ship, a ship they'll call home in the not-too-distant future. Please join me in recognizing the men of Tucson. In our audience today are more than 100 people from the city for which this ship is named. They've traveled a great distance to support and help commemorate this ship's name for their city. We're pleased to have you with us today. The people you see in front of you on the ladders of the dry dock behind me are also special guests. There are thousands more like them. These are the shipbuilders who are building Tucson. I'd also like to have you take note of the bow flag. This design was created by Lisa Larrabee, a 14-year-old Tucson High School student. I think you'll agree that she did a great job. It graces your ship well. You know, the city of Tucson and the submarine have a lot in common. For example, compare the people who founded the city of Tucson with those that developed the submarine. Both were pioneers who discovered and conquered unknown territories. One, the western frontier, the other, the depths of the ocean. The first European soldiers, adventurers, and men of God came to Arizona to pursue the promise of riches. For the adventurers who rode with the Spanish army, stories of the cities of gold were met with the harsh reality of the desert. The idea of the submarine, first conceived by John Holland and others, including the novelist Jules Verne, was to spend most of the ship's operational time submerged. But as with the Spanish adventurers, fact didn't quite live up to fiction. In fact, the early subs were really more like surface ships with the capability of submerging for short periods. Even the submarines of World War II were severely limited in how long they could stay submerged. Time and technology changed all of that for both the city and the sub. For Tucson, it was the arrival of the Southern Pacific trains in the 1880s. Engine number 41 connected the city with the industrial potential, and it never looked back. The true submarine was born with the advent of nuclear power. It has given these ships their own special brand of freedom, freedom from the world's atmosphere, freedom where submarines can now traverse the seas at high speeds and stay submerged for months, making the dreams of Jules Verne and others a reality. If only Captain Nemo could see us now. Time hasn't transformed everything, though. Though Tucson is much changed, its people have preserved the rugged, individualistic spirit of the range. And you'll find the same spirit among the men who operate submarines for the U.S. Navy. They're among the best and the brightest. In today's ceremony, we honor and salute both the men who sailed this fine submarine and the people of Tucson. Now I'd like to introduce a man who's no stranger to Newport News, a graduate of Harvard University and Boston College Law School. Congressman Scott is a member of the Judiciary Committee, the Science and Space and Technology Committee, and he's also vice chairman of the Energy Committee. He's very committed to our community and is working diligently on the issues important to us all: reducing crime, health care reform, and energy. Bobby Scott has spent most of his life in Newport News and knows the importance of the shipyard. The importance of the shipyard both to this community and to our national defense. We count ourselves fortunate to have his support in Washington. Please welcome Representative Bobby Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips, Representative Colby, Mayor Miller, Representative Bateman, and I welcome you to Newport News, Admiral DeMars, Ms. Kent, and Ms. Kent, and the crew of the Tucson, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here at this celebration of shipbuilding skill. There are few traditions that have as long a history as that of christening ships. And for thousands of years, people have celebrated the launching of ships with good wishes and prayers. In that tradition, let me take this moment to wish this ship a glorious career and ask God to keep its sailors safe from harm. Today, I recognize many of those here as the men and women who have spent years working on the USS TUCSON. This celebration is possible only because of your craftsmanship and professionalism. It is the workers of Newport News Shipbuilding, dedicated and hardworking, that are the parents of this ship. And like parents of a gifted child, you have much to be proud of. So to the workers of the shipyard, congratulations on your achievement. Built by the method of modular construction, this ship is one of the most technologically advanced vessels in the world. Moreover, it will be forever a testament of the talents and capabilities of this yard. From woodworkers to steelworkers, the men and women of this shipyard have demonstrated today, once again, that it is their shipbuilding skills that are the best in the world. For over 100 years, Newport News Shipbuilding has played a key part in American naval history, building almost 700 ships of all classes and all sizes. This yard has a worldwide reputation for building and designing only the best. From the large, luxurious passenger ships, to complex tankers, to powerful nuclear aircraft carriers, and to the quietest of hunter-killer submarines, Newport News has the experience and the people to build any ship on time and on budget. It is this skill, to build good ships on time and on budget, which will become even more important in the future. During this time of defense downsizing and shrinking of military budgets, we as a community will have to fight harder for fewer ship contracts. However, it is critical that we as a nation maintain a strong national defense. One only needs to read the paper to see that we still face dangerous threats and that our allies still need our support and the U.S. interests abroad still need protecting. To meet these needs, this nation will require a strong Navy, one that is capable of projecting force when and where necessary. And to accomplish this goal, we must continue to build aircraft carriers. This means that CVN-76, the next aircraft carrier, must be funded on time this year. The founder of this yard, Carlos B. Huntington, once stated that this yard should be a credit to our country as well as ourselves. Looking at this ship and knowing the history of this yard, I can see that this yard has achieved and is continuing to achieve that goal. Let me again congratulate Newport News Shipbuilding on a job well done. Thank you and Godspeed.
Thank you, Congressman Scott. You know, I think we've got an Arizona sky today. Isn't it beautiful? Our next speaker serves as mayor of the city of Tucson. George Miller is a former Marine who was awarded the Purple Heart during World War II. He holds a Bachelor of Science and a Master's degree in Education from the University of Arizona located in Tucson. He's been a teacher and an entrepreneur, all the while playing an active role in local politics since the early 1960s. Mr. Miller served on the Tucson City Council from 1977 to 1991 and also served as vice mayor before being elected to his present position. Please welcome Mayor Miller.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to see so many people here and to think about that we in Tucson are celebrating a naval ship. We are the largest city in the United States that gets all its water from underground. So that may be a good place for a submarine, I don't know. But I want to thank you all for inviting me to participate in the christening of the USS Tucson. I'm pleased, really pleased to be here, both as the mayor of Tucson, Arizona, and as a veteran. Today, I feel it's extremely important to give some well-deserved recognition, not only to the members of the team of Tucson, but also to their wives and families. Here we have a splendid crew and a group of officers who are educated, thoroughly trained, highly motivated, and dedicated to their careers. Behind this choice selection of young Americans are the families that enable these men to make the staggering sacrifices of time and energy that are necessary in building and operating a ship as exceptional as the USS Tucson. We cannot forget that Team Tucson also includes the shipbuilders of Newport News Shipbuilding. Without them, this superb crew would be just another crew. I'd personally like to extend my appreciation to the family of Team Tucson, many of them who are present for today's ceremony. You should know that your support has made this day possible. The success of this undertaking requires the involvement of certain types of individuals whose character, drive, and knowledge help others to pursue their goals. We call them role models. Looking around today, I can see no better example of positive role models for future and fellow crew members of the USS Tucson than the hardworking group of people assembled here today. Under the expert guidance and respected leadership of Commander Dwayne Baker, I have no doubt that the officers and crew of USS Tucson will be successful in helping to ensure the United States' position as a world leader. On behalf of the Tucson City Council and the citizens of Tucson, Arizona, I would like to thank everyone involved in making today's event possible. Our city is honored, really honored, to be a substantial part of the history that's making right now. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Miller. I'm pleased to welcome back our next guest to Newport News Shipbuilding. Not that he doesn't come here often, because he's here for every sea trial we have, and some inspections in between, but he's always welcome. Admiral Bruce DeMars is Director of the Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program for the United States Navy. He's a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, and Admiral DeMars has a long history of serving aboard submarines, both diesel and nuclear. Shore duties include serving as an instructor at the Nuclear Power School and attendance at the Armed Forces Staff College. He served as senior member of the Nuclear Propulsion Examining Board, U.S. Atlantic Fleet, and he commanded Submarine Development Squadron 12 in New London. As a flag officer, Admiral DeMars served as Commander, U.S. Naval Forces, Marianas, Commander, U.S. Naval Base, Guam, Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Representative from Guam and the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, and as Assistant Deputy Chief and then Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Submarine Warfare. Please welcome our friend, Admiral Bruce DeMars.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips, for that kind introduction. Congressman Colby, Congressman Bateman, Congressman Scott, Mayor Miller, people of Tucson, honored guests, Mrs. Rickover, and particularly Laura and Mrs. Diane Kent, who are the focus of these proceedings today. It's always a distinct pleasure to be here at Newport News. First, the hospitality is always first-rate and genuine, and I thank you for that. And second, this ceremony provides an opportunity to recognize the workers here at this impressive shipyard. By workers, I mean the waterfront and the shop crafts, the engineers and the technicians, and the supervisors and the managers. You represent a most valuable enterprise, among the last vestiges of truly heavy industry in this country. Heavy industry, yet with the care and the quality demanded by the exigencies of deep submergence and nuclear propulsion. These are demands that are understood by you here in the yard, but you're generally too busy to stand back and really appreciate this noteworthy endeavor. Your aircraft carriers and your submarines are the most complicated things built in this country today. While there's great turmoil in this country's defense industry, and I realize it affects many of you here very personally, it was clear to me that this capability has been, is today, and will continue to be in the future of great importance to the country. We're a maritime nation, an island nation, and a strong Navy will always be in our country's best interest. And Newport News will remain key to a strong Navy. So I salute you and charge you to continue to work hard to produce a high-quality, cost-effective asset. You are a national value to this country. I'm most privileged today to introduce our principal speaker. I do this occasionally, but I'm not always advantaged by having real personal knowledge of the individual. This is not the case today, as Congressman Jim Colby and I were shipmates. We submerged together last year under the Arctic ice in USS San Juan, the first of the improved Los Angeles-class attack submarines, the same class as Tucson here today. Now, going to the Arctic to ride a submarine is not something that attracts dilettantes. It's a 2-day trip. It's a long airplane ride during which an admiral subjects you to a hard sell. You put on more clothes than you've ever worn at one time in your life. You stand around in the ice pack on top of the world, getting cold and thinking about survival for what seems like an eternity. You get aboard the submarine, you eat too much, you get too little sleep, and you're made fun of by sailors who paint your nose blue in some sort of a ceremony. and there is no press coverage, so a congressman must really want to do it. But obviously, these circumstances show the true measure of an individual. And so I can say that we all can be justifiably proud of a system of government that results in a person such as Congressman Jim Colby working for this country in the United States Congress. He is a Navy veteran, having served with distinction in Vietnam. He is pragmatic, thoughtful, and patriotic. You quickly realize that here is a man who works hard at representing both the people of the 5th District of Arizona and also the larger interests of all the people of the United States. His presence here today validates his broad concerns for this country. It's a distinct privilege and a personal honor to introduce a congressman from the 5th District of Arizona, Congressman Jim Colby.
Thank you very much, Admiral DeMars, for those warm remarks of introduction. There is press here today, and I wonder if we can get all those remarks on tape here so that we could use them back in Arizona. And by the way, anybody that's complaining about this being cold at all here today, nothing like last April when we were standing up there on that polar ice cap. I'm very honored to share this platform today with Admiral DeMars, the Tucson sponsor, Ms. Diane Kent, the maid of honor, Laura Kent, Pat Phillips, the president of this shipyard, which stands as a testament to the quality of American workers and their productivity. By the way, Pat, this may be Arizona sky, but it isn't quite Arizona temperature here today. With Mayor George Miller, my good friend from Tucson, Congressman Bobby Scott and Herb Bateman, my colleagues from Southeast Virginia, our distinguished naval guests who are on the platform with us this morning, most notably our prospective commanding officer of the USS Tucson, Commander Dwayne Baker. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to be here today to take part in this ceremony, this celebration, especially since I am, as you just heard, and as Winston Churchill used to describe himself in correspondence with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as a former naval person. But I must confess that when I received Navy Secretary Dalton's letter asking me to take part in the Tucson's christening, I was just a bit surprised. I was afraid they thought they had addressed the letter to the senator from Arizona and that the invitation would be withdrawn as soon as they discovered their mistake. So I hastily accepted it. I'm reminded of a former colleague of ours, Iowa Congressman Guy Gillette, whose housekeeper noticed his picture on the front page of the hometown newspaper in Iowa one morning with the caption suggesting he might be nominated for the Senate. Not sure of the significance of this, she asked him, "Is a senator higher than a congressman?" Gillette responded that it was, reasoning that a senator represents the entire state instead of just a district that is part of the state. But not satisfied with that answer, his loyal housekeeper pressed further and asked, "Is there anything lower than a congressman?" How many of you can guess where we're heading with this story here? The congressman and later the senator had an all too serious look on his face when he replied that indeed most Americans probably thought there was nothing that was lower than a congressman. For a congressman who may aspire to something higher than the lowest of the low, this event is important symbolism, because this ship too began as simple, lowly pieces of steel and wire and metal. Today we see before us this mighty ship, the USS Tucson. As a boat, it is more than 6,900 tons of metal, wiring, and high-technology equipment. But it is far more than that. It is the sum of all of its parts. Tucson is the physical product built by the dedicated men and women of Newport News Shipbuilding who are represented here today, around us, and throughout the audience. But it is kneaded and molded into a ship of the fleet of the U.S. Navy in the hands of the officers and crew and their families, the lifeblood of the USS Tucson. These are the highly trained, highly educated, thoroughly trained, and very motivated young Americans who have chosen to serve their country as part of the best submarine force in the world. what better role models could we find for the youth of Tucson, Arizona, than this group of drug-free, physically and mentally fit, enthusiastic, dedicated, and well-trained men. But as I said a moment earlier, Team Tucson is more than just the men who comprise its crew. It includes the families, most of whom are here today watching proudly as the USS Tucson begins its journey into the submarine fleet with the U.S. Navy. The life of a Navy family is a difficult one. These men will spend as long as 6 months away from their loved ones at a time. When the ship sets sail into the U.S. Navy, its crew will sail with the full love and support of their families. It is that unflinching support that allows this tremendous weapon system to be such an effective watchdog of our seas. In the words of the Roman warrior Lucius Catiline, your spirit, your age, your valor give me confidence. Newport News Shipbuilding has put its accumulated knowledge into building this, its 27th Los Angeles-class submarine. While each Navy vessel is unique, the Tucson represents nearly 220 years of American submarine building experience. In 1776, David Bushnell designed the Turtle, a small submersible used to affix a drill bit with a bomb attached to it to the bottom of an enemy ship that was anchored in New York Harbor. Now, just about 220 years later, we stand here at Newport News Shipbuilding, surrounded by American know-how, ingenuity, and pride. This important industrial base, with its highly specialized personnel and facilities, its techniques, its craftsmanship, must not be lost to our nation's defense capability. It gives us the unique capability to build this descendant of the Turtle many generations removed both in size and technology, a stealthy and deadly boat capable of projecting power to every corner of the globe. Congress will continue to debate the size and the composition of our military forces, but as we do, we must keep in mind the industrial complex that makes it possible. We must consider the profound effects changes in our military forces will have on that industrial base and the individual workers who populate it. Rosie the Riveter belonged to a different era, but she symbolizes today, as she did then, the inextricable link between fighting forces abroad and civilian workers at home. If America is to remain strong tomorrow, as it is today, we must not forget nor neglect that link. This ship, SSN 770, inherits the proud heritage of another warship bearing the name Tucson. CLAA 98 was an anti-aircraft light cruiser christened almost 50 years, exactly 50 years ago. By the way, that was 20 months after laying the keel. Construction was simpler in those days, I think, Pat. This ship saw combat in the waning weeks of World War II and stood at anchor in Tokyo Bay on September 2nd, 1945, a silent witness to the surrender of the Japanese Empire nearby on the USS Missouri. Though its life was relatively short in the U.S. Navy, these two vessels, bearing the common name of our proud city, have many similarities. Both were built to secure America's role as a world power in a dangerous and uncertain time. Both have in common a crew that makes enormous personal sacrifices to protect us day and night. And I want to pay tribute to the men joining us here today who served on that first USS Tucson. Many of them have come to be with us. Would they stand and be recognized? I'd like them to stand and be recognized. Thank you. We're very proud of you and your service. Today, you pass Tucson's baton to the officers and crew of SSN 770. With that baton is passed both a proud heritage and a great responsibility. I can think of no people I would rather have associated with Tucson, Arizona, than the officers and crew of these great ships. The USS Tucson is a nuclear-powered vessel requiring refueling perhaps only once in its entire life. But ultimately, Tucson draws its energy from a nation that treasures freedom, a nation that understands a strong national defense is no luxury, but a necessity, a price free people bear willingly. Unthinking cuts in our military forces, whether they derive from internal Pentagon studies or result from the pressure of groups who refuse to believe there still remains forces at work in an uncertain world that pose threats to our national security. Such cuts will surely leave our proud fighting forces without adequate resources or manpower. We have seen miracles occur in the last few years, tearing down the Berlin Wall, the end of the Warsaw Pact, dissolving the former Soviet Union, a renewed hope for peace in the Middle East, and the first non-racial election in South Africa. How ironic it is that we actually confront a world in many ways less safe today than at the height of the Cold War. Russia still has a large arsenal of missiles and warheads, but now its economy and its political structure is in near collapse. Meanwhile, missiles and warheads remain in other countries of the former Soviet Union, and the risk of an accidental or unauthorized launch is greatly increased. Long-range missile technology is proliferating. By the end of this decade, we could be faced with a dozen or more countries all armed with long-range nuclear missiles. China is buying ICBMs from Russia and selling arms to Iran. North Korea almost certainly has a finger on the nuclear trigger. The recent massacre in Hebron reminds us painfully, tragically, how fragile is the emerging peace in that region of the world. And meanwhile, Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi continue to occupy positions of power in their respective countries. More than a decade ago, this country launched a military buildup to counter an increasingly aggressive and powerful Soviet Union. The fruit of this policy is today strikingly apparent. Democracy won the Cold War, communism lost. We must not forget the lesson this teaches us. A strong defense and a powerful military is necessary if our nation is to remain at peace. If the profound and positive changes that have taken place in the world this last decade are not to be reversed or diluted, we must not revert or retreat into irresponsible public policy. We must ensure that our men and women in uniform are armed, equipped, and supported. To do this, we must build ships like the USS Tucson, which will join a family of naval submarines that comprises 40% of all U.S. combatant ships. Aircraft carriers like the United States, the John Stennis, being built just a few hundred feet from us, allow us to project that power to every corner of the world. We must put into the field the finest tanks, aircraft, and weapons systems available. We must have the best tools ready to link up with the best trained, the best qualified people if we are to protect our interests around the world. The crest of the USS Tucson was designed by Susana Arias, a junior at Tucson Magnet High School. By the way, Susana's in our audience, and I'd like her to stand. Where is Susana here? Would Susana stand to be recognized? At the center of the crest is the image of the mission Sanavir del Bac, also known to us affectionately in Tucson as the White Dove of the Desert. This mission, founded in 1683 by Father Kino, is both a landmark of Tucson and an appropriate symbol for this boat. As Father Kino pushed forward the frontiers of New Spain, this boat pushes the frontiers of technology and the frontiers of vast and deep oceans. As Father Kino advanced his faith protected by the soldiers of New Spain, so the USS Tucson advances peace around our globe, protected by its shield of armament. Today, Sanavir mission remains a symbol of peace, hope, and a better life. And within its walls, those virtues live on. Now the USS Tucson prepares to join it as an instrument of peace. Those who serve aboard this ship know full well the destructive power of its weapons. But destruction is not their mission. Maintaining peace and security are. So the Tucson will sail in peace, prepared for war. More than a half-century ago, with war clouds gathering over the horizon in Europe and in Asia, Secretary of State Cordell Hull traveled to Buenos Aires to sound the alarm at a Western Hemisphere conference called to maintain peace. The delegates meeting here in the face of these grave and threatening world conditions, he said, must realize that mere words will not suffice. He went on to add this advice: we must quicken our words and our hopes into a specific, embracing program to maintain peace. Such a program adequately implemented should constitute an armory of peace. It should comprise a structure affording all practical means for safeguarding peace. At a time when many other governments or peoples fail or fear to proclaim and embrace a broad or definite peace plan or movement, we of the Americas must cry out for peace, keep alive the spirit of peace, live by the rules of peace, and perfect the machinery for its maintenance. Should we fail to make this outstanding contribution, it would be a practical desertion of the cause of peace and a tragic blow to the hopes of humanity. I think these words of Cordell Hull ring as true today as they did 2 generations ago. I thank you, and I bid the officers and crew of the USS Tucson Godspeed.
Thank you, Congressman Colby, and thanks also for joining us today and helping us celebrate the christening of the Tucson. Speaking of christenings, it's time to introduce you to the 2 ladies who play the most important roles in today's festivities. If our sponsor and maid of honor would join me at the podium, please. Our sponsor hails from our nation's capital and grew up in Bethesda, Maryland. She's a graduate of Emory University in Atlanta, and later she returned to Bethesda to work at the National Institutes of Health. A music enthusiast, she is past president, show director, and current performance manager for a 90-voice woman's barbershop chorus. I tried to talk her a little while ago into a little music this morning, and she declined. She needs all of our participants, I believe. She also performs in a quartet and an octet. In addition to singing, Ms. Kent is very active in mission work projects. She's married to Gerald Cann, former Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition. Ladies and gentlemen, our sponsor, Diane Kent. Our maid of honor is the daughter of our sponsor. Ms. Diane Kent is a graduate of Walter Johnson High School in Bethesda, currently a freshman at Kenyon College in Ohio, and she's majoring in biology. She plans to one day practice veterinarian medicine. She's inherited a love for music from her mother. She's also followed in her mother's footstep in the commitment to mission work, serving church missions and outreach projects in both South Carolina and Bolivia. Please welcome our maid of honor, Laura Kent. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just about ready to christen Tucson. But before we do, I want to tell you about the champagne we're using to christen this ship. It's a 1991 sparkling Riesling from R.W. Webb Winery located just outside of Tucson. Also the particular vintage used today is bottle number 770. For those of you who may not have read the program in this detail, the same number as the ship. You know, what could be more fitting? As long as the glass is not too thick. And now, ladies, if you join me, we'll go topside for the rest of the ceremony.
I christen thee the USS Tucson.
you like this wind? I wasn't as fortunate. I got wet. You know, I understand that Diane's husband, Gerald Cann, that she's been practicing at home, and on one corner of the house, they've got a couple brick that are a little bit loose. I can believe that now. Diane, we have for you what's left in pieces of the bottle. You can see, you know, a golf club, as we were talking earlier, has a sweet spot. This bottle does also, and it's indicated by a red ribbon inside. And Diane did a very, very good job of coming right in on that red line. And we saw evidence of why. Okay. And with this, we'd like to present you. It reads, presented to Diane C. Kent, sponsor, USS Tucson, SSN 770, christening March 19th, 1994, Newport News Shipbuilding. And this is also bottle 770. And Diane, if you have some remarks.
I can't tell you how honored I am to be here, and that was a thrill of a lifetime. When I received the invitation from Secretary O'Keefe to be the sponsor of the USS Tucson, I was both thrilled at the honor and respect accorded to Jerry, my husband, and awed by the prospect of my long-term association with this submarine, her builders, and her officers and crew. But as the time drew near to the christening date, and I was informed that I would be invited to make a few remarks, those feelings of honor and awe turned into humility. I decided I needed to visit the shipyard and see what this was all about and to meet the skipper and the crew. And upon visiting this shipyard a few weeks ago, seeing the spirit, the dedication and pride of the crew and officers who would take the Tucson on sea trials, I gained an enhanced respect for those who serve on submarines. Self-discipline, coupled with an unfaltering team spirit, seemed to personify Team Tucson. Awesome, also, were my observations of how much knowledge, technology, and sheer muscle power are at work to produce and operate a submarine. So, what meaningful thing could I say to these people who have dedicated their lives either to the production or the operation of our country's naval vessels? I'm not a Navy wife, so I've not stood in the shoes of those who have moved from place to place, trying to maintain some semblance of family normalcy with one member of the team away at sea for long periods of time. I've not stood in the shoes of those whose painstaking creative technology have led to the production of the finest ships in the world. I have not stood in the shoes of the wonderful men and women of the Navy who have trained hard, dedicated, and laid their very lives on the line to maintain a strong presence in the world, to deter war and protect peace. The only shoes I can stand in are my own, and I can surely appreciate all that these people have done for me and for my country. I can be thankful that there are those who are capable and willing to dedicate their lives to protecting peace for me, my family, and my country. And I can be most humbled and honored to be the sponsor for the USS Tucson. And I'm so proud to be a part of Team Tucson. Thank you for this honor, and God bless you all.
And thank you all for coming to the ceremony and bringing this lovely weather with you. On behalf of everyone at Newport News Shipbuilding, our entire family, we thank you for being here. We thank our sponsor for a lovely day and ceremony and for taking a part in this celebration. With that, that's the conclusion of the program. Goodbye and God bless.